I get a call, from Abhishek saying that 1 second, Dad wants to talk to you.
How important do you think is like listening to music that you normally wouldn't listen to?
I don't care if you're doing rock, metal, whatever.
Yeah.
If you study Indian music, it's going to change your life and it's going to improve your music.
We have all heard a version of people saying कि टूटे हुए दिल से ही music निकलता है. Do you completely believe in that ideology?
I feel that great music comes from hunger. One thing I like to say, about creativity, it's basically like a catching a butterfly.
Do you have a favorite guitar chord? अगर आप भी गिटार सीखना चाहते हैं and you want to take your guitar playing to the next level, then check out my intermediate guitar course called Next Level Guitar. इस गिटार कोर्स में हम बहुत सारे इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक्स को कवर करेंगे, जैसे कि कोई भी गाने के कॉर्ड्स खुद से कैसे निकालने हैं, बार कॉर्ड्स कैसे बजाना है, एक्सटेंडेड कॉर्ड्स, फिंगर पिकिंग, music theory, and also a little bit of ear training. I can't wait to see you inside the course. Hope you have fun learning. Click the link to sign up now. I actually even have some questions written down because these came to me for when I was listening to the music and a lot of different times around the past few days, So this is going to be interesting. But anyway, first of all, I wanted to welcome you to the music circle. To give you like a quick idea on what the music circle is basically, I believe that you are kind of the sum of the people you hang out with, So when you make your circle to the point where you're hanging out with people who are way better than you, you kind of are automatically pushed into that zone and you try to become better as well. So that's why I even love the logo of this music circle, because it's just two people, and when it coincides, the coinciding part is the music.
Nice.
So that's why I'm actually really excited that you could make it to the
thanks for having me, man.
100% podcast today.
Great.
And yes, we are going to talk about the album, but first I have to tell you where I actually came across your music.
Okay.
And it's not the album, it's actually way back in the day when I actually heard Nimoli from Coke Studio. Yeah. And that was one of the best songs that even my mom loves. So my mom, again, as I told you, we are from Rajasthani roots. We come from there. So it is something kind of that natural, feels natural. And before we go into the album, can you kind of remember what it was like to create that song?
Nimoli?
Yeah.
It was grueling and intense, man. So Coke Studio happened, they came to me right when I finished the first Voyage album. I went and met Aditya Swami, who was then head of MTV. And he heard the album, he loved it, and there was a hole in their schedule. Some composer was committed, but he couldn't do it. So they had literally 1 week to do this. They had the shoot committed, and they asked me whether I can write 3 songs in 1 week. So not that I was going to say no, I just said yes because that was the only window opportunity available at that point.
Right.
And then I left their office. I was like, shit. This is like the worst way to commit to a project. But, the good thing is that because I come from an advertising background, you're used to insane deadlines. So the very day I finished the meeting, I went back to the studio and I started kind of looking at, what I could sort of work on. And luckily, Nimoli was a song that I had worked on with Ilaji before, but not in the way that it was. It was very different. So I kind of thought that there'll be an interesting. I was also listening to a lot of Balkan music at that time, so I had this idea of mixing Balkan music with this melody, and then basically that's how that song was born. I had 1 week to write 3 songs. They're all different songs, and but then I had to also, because I was already just finished working with Kalpana. That's how the Bidha song came, and then Ilaji, of course. And then the third song is Arab, which was this flamenco-influenced song, which was again a very difficult song to compose because we found this...
Also a song that you sung, right?
I sung on that, yes.
Yeah.
I just felt like I needed to sing that part because that part came first. And then we found this Doha, which was sung by Master Salim. But it was this entire project was done in a very short time, like 4-5 days. We finished all the 3 songs, producing it,
God.
recording, everything. Went and shot it.
Even the shoot was done in between those
It had
days?
exactly 7 days.
Wow.
It was a 7-day
Crazy.
window in which to do it.
Crazy.
So, but this was not, also, I'll tell you something else. This was not the first time I have produced stuff like this in a short period. There's another song that I had done for a movie called Drona, which was a song called Bandagi. It's a very beautiful ballad, which coincidentally was also written on a day where I had a very intense day. Those days I was with Blue Frog, and I had this morning, my commitments in Blue Frog was we used to have these long meetings, usually lasting for 4 to 5 hours sometimes. There were intense meetings, discussions with the partners and with the F&B team and all that. And that particular morning, I knew I had to go back to the studio and work on this one song. I had the worst morning like we could imagine. There was a very vicious fight. I can't remember with whom now. And I was completely I was shaking at the end of that morning. And I was really upset. And I came back to the studio and I composed that song in one sitting in like 3 hours.
Wow.
So, sometimes, inspiration strikes in the most bizarre
ways.
times.
Yeah, of course.
And that song I finished in one sitting. I sent it off to Goldie Bell, who was the director, and he heard it and he played it for Abhishek, and Abhishek played it to Mr. Bachchan. And then next morning at 7 a.m. I get a call, from Abhishek saying that, 1 second, Dad wants to talk to you. So first I thought it's a prank. Obviously, because 7 in the morning, who's going to call. And then Mr. Bachchan comes on the line and he's like, Dhruv, I've been listening to this song all night. And I'm on the treadmill. I've heard it about 100 times. Don't change anything. Just put it out the way it is. And you think about it. It's just sometimes strange things happen in the most strange ways.
Right.
So you can never really plan creativity. And there's one thing I like to say, about creativity. It's basically like catching a butterfly.
100%.
It's so difficult. You really don't know when the song is going to come. I think you just have to kind of be open.
Right.
And you have to always be sensitive and open and ready to kind of catch it anytime.
Right. So from this, I think I have 3 questions that already came to my mind when you were talking about this. One is when Mr. Bachchan told you that you don't change anything and just put it out as it is, right?
Yeah.
Now, I have seen so many musicians,
Yeah.
and myself included, when you start on a project or start on an idea, and you start it, you don't feel that great about it, so you try to make it better.
Yeah.
And then you keep adding changes, and then you find out after 10 days कि यार वो पहला वाला ही सबसे best था.
Happens.
Right?
It does happen, yes.
How often does it happen? And
It happens quite often. In fact,
Right.
Like 90% of the stuff that goes out, I usually sing it first, and there'll be there'll always one demo of anything that I've done which is in my voice. And I think there's always an honesty I feel in the composer's voice, because it's the first sort of thing.
100%, yeah.
But I feel that there is merit in both sides in using your own voice, but I think there's nothing like giving it to a professional singer, because a lot of times a professional singer will come in and just elevate it to a different level. And I think it's hard to say that one way is right or the other is, but you kind of have to trust your instinct sometimes. Sometimes I'll really feel that this is working in my voice, let's not touch it.
Right.
And it happens a lot. But a lot of times I feel that it's better in somebody else's voice.
So, when I kind of saw a couple of videos on the newest album that you did, which is called Voyage 2, and here you had told that you actually worked on a multiple arrangements for each single song, right?
That's true, yeah.
So, did that happen? Do you always do that, or did that happen with Nimoli as well?
Nimoli, it happened. Almost on every song, I think I've done multiple, except for maybe Rasia, because we had no time. That was the last song done on the album. So, but that song, I already had a concept for how I wanted to produce it. So, because the Voyage is like more a producer's album and not me singing, and it's not it's not as much a singer-songwriter album. Like for me, when I'm producing, I like to experiment a lot. And I kind of see production as like a way a DJ would see, when you're mixing 2 decks. So this is your song deck, which is we've already agreed on. So the song already exists in this case, which is the melody.
Correct.
So it's very important to have this deck in place.
Right.
Without this deck, you can't now start, putting the other stuff together. This deck needs to be kind of fleshed out, and you need to have an idea on where you want to, where the song is starting, where the middle is, and where the finish is, and where you want to finish it. The second deck, which is all the other stuff, which is the dressing, what you
Right.
call what you call production, can actually be anything, really, and it's on your skill on how you can kind of imagine and where you can and what your influences are.
Right.
So like I have a thing which I say to myself, which is like basically production is the guise under which a composition hides.
Right.
Basically because
Interesting.
and production is now taught in schools, and like I feel like it's a strange thing to teach, because if you think like back to how music was created, like is like music that like Beatles, for example, was it production? Like
Right. You can't call it that.
you really can't, right?
Yeah.
So because there were 4 guys playing together, and then they had the 5th member who was George Martin,
right.
who was an equally important member who actually sculpted their sound by putting the mics in the right places and giving it that vibe of that room.
100%.
And you could maybe say the 6th member was the guy who designed Abbey Road. I mean,
yeah,
if you really,
100%.
because that room is so iconic,
Correct,
for the
correct.
sound of that band.
Correct. I sometimes think how, like, something like this where you kind of discover corners in a room, right? Like in Abbey Road, they say that they have a favorite corner there.
Yes.
Where something sounds perfect.
Yeah.
So if I feel that if sometimes that is the case, then sometimes it actually feels that music is like a divine creation, because you
Yeah.
need so many things to go right at the same time.
Yeah, but it's also very subjective. Like, just to come back to what you were saying, a lot of times you'll do multiple arrangements for songs.
Yeah.
And I have, I have different arrangements for each of the songs that I have done. And I think you have to kind of trust your instinct a little
Right.
bit. And that's where your instincts come in.
Right.
And you eventually get hired for your instincts.
Instincts, yeah.
And instincts are a very difficult thing to teach. You can't teach anybody instincts.
I think, would I be right in saying that it comes with time?
Yes, it does. It's experience also, but really listening to your inner voice. Like I feel like for me, when I was like a teenager, if you really want to think about it, we all became musicians because something inside told us that I have something to say.
Right.
I have an opinion on music that I want to express.
Right.
And that is the instinct that you went by when you were 16, 17, 18 or whatever the age you were. And that's like a small flame that keeps burning, and it gets stronger as you get older, and
Yeah.
you learn more, and
Yeah.
you get validation from your peers, you get validation from audiences,
Right.
you tour, you get validation. So I think the more the economy gives you validation, the flame becomes stronger, and your instincts become more stronger.
Right.
Some people don't get that validation because they are shy with
Right.
releasing the music.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of musicians I feel suffer from finishing their music.
Of course.
It's
it's
a
a big
thing,
issue,
right?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
a big issue, and we all suffer from it.
Yeah.
We procrastinate because
Yeah,
we're not sure of
100%.
our ideas. We're like, shit, this doesn't sound. It's not finished, and you wait for that inspiration
Yeah.
to finish it.
I mean, I think if you ask any musician out there, they will definitely have like 10 songs that they have that
Oh.
nobody has heard to.
Dude, I have a hard disk over there in that room, which is like hundreds of ideas
Oh my
from like
God.
2002, which I have not finished. And they'll probably it's better if they're lying there, actually.
Right.
It's better if nobody hears it. But yeah, I think, instincts are very important. Nobody talks about it. People talk about lots of things. They teach music and theory, harmony, and, ear training and all those other things which can be taught, which are more objective.
Right.
But the subjective part is really, how do you kind of hear music that's yours? That
This
you put your
actually is
stamp
a
on it.
very interesting point that you brought up, about instincts, because I actually love listening to business podcasts, and I keep listening to a few here and there, and then I just came across something yesterday or maybe 2 days back where this person said that, as an investor, as an angel investor, you are paid for your instincts.
Yeah.
Because you make money if you make the right decisions.
And you have to bet on the right horse, right?
Bet on the right horse, and they are able to do that because they have spent a lot of time.
Yeah.
And it seems to only come with time.
True. I mean,
Yeah.
in that sense, you could also say that music is a business.
Right.
Because when you put music out, you have to put a bet on it and say that, okay, I'm going to invest 10 lakhs or 20,
Right.
whatever the money is,
Yeah.
quantum of money is, to make a video for this song, to promote the hell out of it,
Yeah.
to do all this other stuff, which to get the song out to a
Out
wide
there,
audience.
yeah.
So, in a sense, you are betting on it, and that also needs some amount of instinctual process,
Right.
so that you decide on which of the 8 songs is the song. And I think the guys who are really good at it, to finding that one song which, like for this album actually, it's been interesting. We've kind of messed around with which would potentially be the song which people would like, because you always look for that one song which
Yeah.
becomes your hook for the
Yeah,
album, so
for the
that
album.
that kind of carries your album to audiences. And strangely, we never thought about Charkha. It was the last song that came to us, and we thought of all different. And because in the initial stages when we were playing the album to different people, almost everybody had a different favorite. It is very rare that, usually people like one song in the
Right.
album, everyone agrees
Yeah.
to that. Most people like different songs, and maybe we got a few hits on Charkha, but it was only towards like 1 month into the release of the album that Charkha started getting some traction.
Got it.
And it's like you could say it's like not the weakest, but it's like the softest. It's the most delicate.
Yeah,
it's
it's the most delicate one in the album, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So it took us a while to even agree on that song as being like the song. But then, when we shot these 4 videos recently, and we were thinking about which one should we put out first. I think at that point, everybody seemed to agree unanimously on Charkha being the one.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, because as we keep talking about that song, that is kind of the only song in that album that has like a very rooted and authentic vibe to it.
Yeah.
Because the song itself starts with some nature sounds.
Yeah.
Right. That was a very cool addition, and I think a very cool way to start the track.
So that is so I grew up actually. No, I wouldn't say I grew up, but I spent a lot of summer holidays in Jaipur. So my grandparents used to live there.
Okay.
And they had a house there, and I remember waking up in the mornings, and there used to be peacocks in the.
Of course, yeah.
In the garden, and there used to be a mali who used to be like sort of.
Oh.
Because the peacocks used to come and eat the flowers, and
yeah.
So that mali used to come and shout at the peacocks.
Okay.
So I remember always had that memory of hearing one man shouting every morning.
Wow.
And then you have these sounds of the peacocks have this beautiful sound.
Of course.
So I wanted to bring back that memory, kind of hearing these birds, and so that beginning is actually a throwback to my childhood, when in Jaipur.
Amazing.
And it kind of also puts you in that place, in a sense, in small towns in India.
Right.
That's kind of the soundtrack of most towns. If you go out of Bombay, right, you hear birds, and you'll hear and there is so much of distances between places.
Yeah.
Especially in villages, that you can hear a human shouting from the other end of the village. So that's kind of
and I think it's a very good way to kind of prepare you for the song that's about to come.
That song, and then the last song as well, which is again sort of ambient and
again like an instrumental ambient track, right? Amazing, because when you hear that village sound and when the guitar riff starts, and then you kind of like sink into it, it's a good way to put it, basically, that you kind of transport yourself into like a village scenario.
Exactly. So again, if you're asking me like where that comes from, I would say that that's also a little bit to do with my film background, and because I do a lot of film work, I also feel that music is incredibly, it's visual, and it kind of it has this visual metaphor to it.
Right.
And I try and like kind of create music which kind of also places you. It's wonderful to look at music like that. It kind of places you in like it has a texture which you, when you close your eyes and you hear it, you kind of transport yourself to a place.
Right.
And like for me, that was kind of what I was going for, to create this very gentle sort of feeling to it.
Talking about the song, the story about the song, can you kind of touch upon that a little bit? What the song talks about? So how do you like end up composing the whole thing?
So Charkha is a traditional song. Ilaji brought that song to me.
Okay.
She would be the best person to tell you about the meaning of the song, because it's in Marwadi.
Yeah.
But from what I do know, what it's about the weavers.
Right.
Like Charkha is the circle which you weave the loom with.
Yeah.
So that's why the beat of the song has this sort of very repetitive, but it has this kind of a, because if you ever been in a handloom, in a place where they weave cloth,
right,
it has this sort of rhythmic quality to it, which is monotonous in a sense,
yeah, which
is very easy, and it has a rhythm. It has like this, thing to it.
Interesting.
So that's what I mean. So when I heard the melody, I wanted to kind of create this very sort of beautiful but graceful sound, which kind of puts you, puts you at ease.
Yeah.
So the song is about the weavers, and it's about the charkha basically.
Interesting. And I think this also has a very cool guitar riff that goes on underneath the whole song, right? And you kind of improvise on that guitar riff also.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing again and again, but it kind of changes also a little bit.
So the guitar riff for me came from, I'll tell you who the inspiration for that guitar was. It's a guitar player called Deuri.
Okay.
Have you heard Deuri?
No, I'm not.
Deuri is a guitar player from Madagascar.
Okay.
He's a virtuoso guitar player. And in fact, he released a few albums he was introduced to me by another guitar player called Henry Kaiser, who's an American guitar player. He traveled to Madagascar and produced these albums with Deuri. Great guitar player. Plays fingerstyle guitar. So when I heard Deuri, which was long back, like almost 15 years back, it has this sort of African influence.
Right,
the song does have that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, it's basically open strings, and it kind of has that. So essentially, it's that, and then all my other influences, which is Eric Johnson and all the other sort of rock influences that are there. But it's kind of a tip of the hat to Deuri.
Right, amazing. And it also has like a short guitar acoustic solo also, right?
Yes.
So I also wanted to ask you about your approach to guitar solos in songs. Now, there are people who kind of want to do it in a way where they jam on the track a couple of times and then do it, or they actually sit down and write some parts and then do it. So how do you do it?
So my thing is guitar solos. I'm a little reticent about playing solos first of all, because even though I played a lot of solo guitar,
right,
I grew up practicing a lot of solo guitar. So I started playing guitar when I was 16, and I went to music school when I was 23, I think. So those 6 years, I was practicing for almost like 4 to 8 hours a day sometimes.
Wow.
I was through college and everything. I would just sit the whole day and play, and usually the playing was playing over songs, and but a lot of the playing towards the end was more exploratory, in a more Indian classical style, which is playing on a drone. So you kind of take the entire fretboard as one. So this is your entire scale. So you stop looking at the scale like this, because normally we look at scales as a box.
You usually look at the box, yeah, correct.
So when I started playing Indian style, I started looking at the scale like this.
Like this, interesting. Yeah.
And then what it does is it forces you to play melodies.
Interesting.
Because you're not playing licks anymore.
Right,
because the guitar is an incredibly geometric instrument.
Yeah.
Because we have two axes. We have the X and the Y axis.
Yeah.
And the screw up with that is that it forces you to play in a geometry which is muscle memory.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to break out of that. It took me a very long time to break out of that. And I have to thank my Indian, music lessons for that. So I had taken music lessons when I was very young, because I started off as a singer. I still sing. And so for me, to come back to your question, I try and kind of like make the solos like melodies. So even the charkha solo is kind of a very intervallic. It's a very intervallic solo.
Right.
But it's very melodic.
Melodic at the same time.
So I don't want to. So that's why I get very scared playing solos, because you can easily go into playing licks and base creative masturbation, to whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And I hate that actually.
Right.
Because for me it's very important to play something which has context, and it's.
And maybe something that contributes more to the song.
Exactly. It becomes iconic to the song.
Right.
So, because even if you think about it, like all the guitar players we love are guys like, from like Mark Knopfler to whoever. They all played solos that we could sing,
100%.
And I never understood that for a long time, because I came from like the shred school of guitar. So I basically grew up playing like a lot of notes.
Right.
So when I heard like people telling me like, oh, have you heard David Gilmour? I would never understand it. I was like, why? But then, as you get more mature and you start having a more open mind.
Yeah.
You understand why people like him, because he is an incredibly melodic guitar player. And he can play things that people can sing along to. And everybody
100%.
wants to sing.
Yeah. And that's actually a very cool way to look at guitar solos.
Yeah.
And also one of the things that you told, that it took you a while to get out of the box, right?
It does. I mean, you have to make a conscious decision to do it. And also it's 2024, so, and I've been playing guitar for a long time. And you always want to like kind of do stuff which is different from what you've done before. For me, it's like, that's what I pride myself on, being like a chameleon.
Right.
So I like that,
Right.
I don't like repeating myself.
Right.
Though having said that, I have done a full-on guitar shred album. I did the trio album with Sheldon and Gino, which was a guitar-based album. It was it was my phase when I was playing a lot of guitar. So I think different strokes for for different songs. So
because this is a very good thing for a lot of viewers out there to kind of look at and understand, that you don't really treat guitar solos as just guitar solos, but you can even, or maybe like, it's according to whatever situation you're in. If you're like writing a solo for a song, then it has to add something to the song.
I think a good thing for guitar players to listen to is also like non-guitar players. This is something a very famous guitar player, a teacher of mine, told me when I went to study in the US. He almost exclusively listened to sax players.
Wow.
Okay, so that's something,
cool.
and that's something a lot of jazz guitar players do.
Right.
They don't listen to other guitar players at all. You get to a place where you've heard so many guitar players that you stop listening to guitar players, you listen to only sax players, because the sax players have only one axis.
Right.
They don't have any other axis. So their melodic vocabulary is extremely strong and very high.
Wow.
It's more sophisticated, because they can kind of, also they have to hear the chords in their heads in order to play through the chords. So if you think about how a sax player plays for a second, he's hearing the change happen before it happens. And most most saxophonists are jazz saxophonists. So they have to kind of hear the chord change and construct the idea well before they can actually execute it, right?
Yeah.
And that's incredibly difficult for a guitar player, because then you have to really be on your toes and you just can't like wank your way through, just play blues licks.
Yeah.
So, having a good harmonic understanding is also very important. So that you can outline the chords, because the Charkha solo is not a very difficult solo to play. It's just slightly intervallic, and it outlines the chords, which is really what it does.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, because most of the times when I kind of put out content on my channel, like the viewers, the most common comment there is like, if somebody is talking about soloing or something, is that how do I get out of the box?
Yeah.
And I think this gives them a lot of answers, because they can actually listen to non-guitar players.
Yeah.
They can look at guitar in like a horizontal one-axis way, which is actually a very, very good way to kind of help you break out of the box.
Funnily, we all started playing guitar like that, if you think about it.
Yeah.
We all started playing on one string.
Yeah, exactly.
But then some teacher somewhere told us that you have to play like this.
Yeah.
And then that became the norm. And then we never went back to playing the other way. So it's like, it's crazy.
It's like the full circle.
But if you think about how a veena player plays, for example, or Carnatic mandolin player, like Hugh Srinivasji, he actually plays both. He plays this way and this way, but because he's on a different plane altogether. But I think also listening to different music, like listening to Indian Hindustani classical, like for me that was a very big change in my thinking. Also because I had studied it earlier, adapting it to my guitar playing has been, it's a process even today that I kind of have to spend time and do. So I enjoy that.
That's actually interesting, because if I can double click on that, what you earlier spoke about is that you were listening to Balkan music before you composed Nimali, right? Now this is something that I have seen common with a lot of composers or music directors. They instinctively or like consciously try to listen to music that's not around them. Some kind of music that's going on around the world, so which will give them like a different spark of inspiration or something. So how important do you think is like listening to music that you normally wouldn't listen to?
It's super important for me.
Yeah.
But I don't do it because I need to do it. I do it because I enjoy doing it.
You enjoy it,
and it also goes back to my earlier influences which I had, which So, like for example, a band like Pat Metheny, you know, great guitar player, and I remember hearing that album, the famous album, the live album of Pat Metheny,
Right.
On the Road to You. So that album was a seminal album in my development as a musician, because when I first heard it, I was blown away because he had different musicians with him who played all these beautiful, amazing different instruments, and it was very compositional in nature, and it was not shred linear. It was not linear music, because the composition moves across and it tells a story just like a classical piece was.
Right.
So for me, that was an amazing revelation by itself. When you hear music like that, it breaks you out of playing 6 chords, 4 chord songs, you know. And then but now you're hearing this music, but you don't know what the hell is happening, because that's another thing. You have to study that, and you know, you have to understand how the chords are moving and what is the relationship between the chords and why is it moving that way. You know, is it being led by melody or is it being led by progressions? So that just takes a lot of time, you know. And then, but when you start doing that, you kind of discover all this other music. Like, what does Pat Metheny listen to? Like, that's the question I asked myself. Like, what would he listen to? And then I started reading about Pat Metheny, and then I can't remember where I read this, but apparently, I don't know if it's true or not.
Okay.
But apparently, Pat Metheny has on his passport a stamp which says permanent transient, which means that he used to travel so much that he didn't have a residence. Apparently, he had I don't know if this is true, but this is what I read. But when I read that, it was like one of those epiphanies, you know, which you felt like you can do that. Like, you don't have to have, like, you can. But obviously, I didn't land up doing that. But the closest I could get to that was maybe listening to all this music that's there all over the world.
Yeah, that's available to you. Yeah, 100%.
And another thing I read, which was a long back, was that he would go to Brazil and spend a few months there and study Brazilian music. And he would interact with those musicians and play with them, and then he would release an album of Brazilian jazz, and you know.
Wow.
And that was like a incredibly humbling thing. Like, how do you get to that level where you can jam with musicians and learn about a culture and this? So I think when you learn all these things and learn about all these great musicians, you kind of start thinking about whether you can you really do this? Like, you know.
Right.
And at that point, this was like the early 90s, like, you know, late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
So we had no access to music. You know, we used to like really struggle to get, like, you know, CDs and music. So even getting to listen to new music was an incredible, like...
Yeah, it felt like an achievement.
Yeah, because you had to, like, you know, you have to always wait for somebody to come from abroad and, you know, bring you new music. So I think all those like new early experiences that I have, which gave me this newness of, you know, gave you that feeling of newness, that continued throughout.
Yeah.
And as it continued, I kept hearing different music from different parts of the world. So Balkan was the most recent one which you asked about, which again came to me because I started listening to a lot of music from, like, you know, Bulgaria.
Right.
Of course, Bulgarian choir music, which is now, you know, big on YouTube. Yeah. But it's because I love it also. But also sometimes I also feel that a lot of it is to do with also what I do, which is I compose for film, and you know, and that in a certain way requires you to. It's a sort of part of, it needs to be part of, you know, your vocabulary in a way.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And it's kind of creeped into my other music, which is what I do.
Yeah, interesting. You know, one of the things that I was talking about my friend with 2 days back was that we were kind of remembering how we used to listen to songs that you just spoke about, right? Like somebody actually got you music from the other country and you got to listen to it then. So we actually, as we were talking about it, we kind of realized that to listen to a new song, you had to work so much.
Yes.
And you had to like kind of acquire it in a way where you felt like, okay, ab mere ko mil gaya. You know? Whereas now, when you compare it, it's like at the touch of a button.
It's on tap, yeah.
It's on tap. And I think that because of that, like, whole process of getting that song, it felt like you kind of achieved that song. And those songs actually tend to stay with you longer.
100% agree with you.
And then it felt like, you know, you had some connection with that song.
I mean, that's one of the things that I keep riffing with the Gen Zs in our studio, that they never get, because it's so easy to access everything, and they look at me like a boomer. Basically, that's what my kids call me now. They call me, "Hey, boomer." So, but you know, there's something right to it, which is what you said. When you have to fight for something, then when you have to really work at getting something, when you get it, then you bloody you better own it. You better enjoy it and you better own it. Then.
Yeah.
So I feel that I mean there is definitely merit in that.
Yeah.
But I don't see that. That's the thing. I mean, again, not to sound like a boomer, but it's kind of not there anymore.
Right.
It's because everything is available.
And it's so easy to
available instant in multiple formats. How do you want to consume music now? It's like that's the question. When earlier, if you ask somebody, they were like, "What do you mean?" I have to go back home and put on my cassette player and put a cassette in. And, or a few years before that, I have to put my vinyl in, and
And we thought that kind of listening to music was for us Apple Music and Spotify. But you won't believe, yesterday I was speaking to one of my friends who is relatively younger, and I asked him, where do you listen to music? And he was like, Reels. And it blew my mind. Like, okay, you depend on Reels to discover new songs.
Yep.
That was something that even I hadn't thought about.
I'm guilty of that now. I heard some very cool music through Instagram.
Of course, even same as me, because I kind of run into some songs that you kind of want to,
exactly. Mostly ear candy. That's what makes it. None of that music is going to be music that you're going to listen to.
Yeah, I agree.
It's earworm, not ear candy.
Yeah, earworm. Yeah. So, actually, it's kind of crazy that those things are happening. But coming back to the album, firstly, congratulations on the album that's coming out. How do you finally feel that the album is out now, and how long have you worked on it?
Tired. Feel tired. Actually, I worked on it ferociously this year.
Okay.
But a lot of the ideas were kind of cooking for a while now. But I mostly finished everything. The problem is finishing. So last year we started a label, Vava Records, and I didn't want this to be the first one out of the gate because I wanted to put all the processes in place, and there's a lot of things to learn about how you need to put music out in in today. So because we are a small team, I kind of wanted to learn all those things. So we went out and put out some legacy projects, which I got back. My partner Ashu and I, we did a bunch of projects in the early 2000s. So I got all those projects back. We've released those now. Last year we released those. Then I did another project called Mumbai Star, which was a musical I did for Japan. So all these projects have been out. The pipe is sort of oiled, you could say.
Yeah.
And then this was the next on the anvil. So I needed to finish it. So I started working on it earnestly only this year, to finish it. And it was 6 months of intense work, but also working with amazing people all over the world. So it's an incredibly collaborative project. A lot of the ideas were already fleshed out and put in place.
Okay.
And then the way I work is I'll write the bass line, I'll sort of play it in a way that I'm kind of hearing it. And then I'll give it to some incredible musician to re-perform it, so to speak.
Got it.
And bring his own sort of, thing to it. And so that took a while, because if you want to work with great musicians, you have to wait for them to get free. So, so that always takes time, and that's the only thing that took time, really, waiting for people to come on board, to finish it. And then, of course, the mixing, which is a nightmare for me, if you ask me. But this is the first time I actually mixed where I didn't mix it myself. I mean, I only sort of gave notes, very detailed notes, and worked with two incredible engineers, one in London and one in Mumbai.
Okay.
So Safi, who lives in London, and he mixed half of the album, and Hirsch is mixed the 5 tracks.
Understood. So now, as the album starts, I think it starts with a very fitting song called Suprabhatam.
Yes.
And that is again a song that's very special to me, because it has been a constant,
of course,
yearly kind of a thing, because I was born and brought up in Tamil Nadu.
Okay.
So I'm a Rajasthani Marwadi, but I was born and brought up in Tamil Nadu. And it's
cool
if you're in Tamil Nadu, then you listen to it almost every day. And especially I, with my dad and with my family, make it a year, like an annual trip to Tirupati also.
Of course.
So this is like the stars,
it's the
track here.
Of,
it's the soundtrack of that place.
In fact, I was aware of, everybody is, like you said, is aware of Suprabhatam, but the first time I actually heard it, or sort of felt the power of it, was when I was in Tirupati.
Okay.
This is like 2004 or 2003, I can't remember.
Oh,
now.
wow.
And I remember it was like 6 in the morning or something, and we were walking in, and when you walk into that hall,
yes.
it is incredibly powerful. And I remember hearing it then and having that effect. It had this very, very profound effect on me. Hearing it with live, with the temple bells and everything. So stayed with me. And then I heard it again a few years later. I can't remember where. I heard Bangalore Sisters recording of it.
Right.
And when I heard it then, that's when I heard this drum and bass thing in my head. So I just said, like, maybe this could be a cool idea to do this drum and bass thing. So I got my friend Nandini in, and then she recorded the first part, and then we kind of jammed, and she came up with the second part, which is the verse in the song. And then I just had cold feet. I don't know why. I just like kind of abandoned the song.
Right.
I just felt like maybe, the Carnatic mafia will come after me and kill me or something for doing something so blasphemous. So I just left it actually. And for many years I didn't kind of look at it. I thought, maybe it's too it's wrong maybe.
Okay. And this was already done for a couple of years?
I think this was like a year and a half, 2 years, a few years ago.
Okay.
And then COVID happened and all that. And then because I knew I had to finish the album, I was looking for songs. And usually the way I'll work is I'll have lots of songs. And then I'll choose, you shortlist a few.
Yeah, of course.
So this was one of the songs that I shortlisted to finish. And then I gave the song to Soma Sekharji, who's the who's the Konakol artist on the song, just to test like what he will say. And if he's gonna, and I told myself, if he's gonna come back and say, "What's wrong with you, you idiot?" Like don't insult us or something, I will just take the song back and say, "Sorry, sir." And that's the end of that song. That song is going back and it's never coming back. But he loved it. He was like, "Wow, this is so cool." And and that time the song didn't even have drums on it. It just had like a programmed beat on it with some programmed synth basses. He loved it and he said, "I'm going to compose something in the mid, the song." And then he did it, and then I gave it to Abhay because I couldn't do justice to the Konakol. I needed somebody to, from the culture to play the solo. And then the song, and same thing, Abhay heard it and went, "Amazing, I'm doing it." So then that validation was very important because I felt a little easy. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll survive. Nobody's coming to my house to kill me in the middle of the night. Right. So that's how that song kind of, and then I produced and then I finished the harmonies and writing stuff behind it, and got my friend Lindsay to play on it. Mohini came and played on it. So
amazing. So that's the first song, and then after that, I think the song that I heard too after the album was Deuri.
Yeah.
And that song kind of feels like the flag bearer of the album. In a certain sense. And again, I have been a huge fan of Kalpana ma'am after listening to her in Coke Studio. But it's one of those voices that has a different kind of a stature. A very powerful voice. And I just wanted to talk to us about how that song came into existence.
Deuri, yeah. So there is another arrangement for Deuri.
Okay.
Which is very different from this.
Okay.
Which is like almost like a rock, I wouldn't say it's a jazz rock. It's like a straight up rock, very sort of. I can't even. If I have to give you a reference, what band would I give you?
Is it like classic rock or hard rock? Or?
Yeah, it's like classic rock, maybe Nickelback. Not even Nickelback actually, but it's kind of like strange. It's like a rock straight up guitars and straight drum groove. And so that's kind of what I'd done for Deuri, and again sitting there for a while, I was like, "Man, it's not really no fun. It's not really speaking to me,
Okay.
So that song kind of, then I threw that arrangement out, and then I started working on another arrangement completely from scratch. And so usually the way I like to work is I'll take the vocal, and then I'll build stuff around it. That's kind of how I do it. And then you put all the parts in, and it took a while to kind of frame the whole thing. The main thing was to find this groove which I wanted, which again is this upbeat. It's got this 16th note upbeat thing, the which are the comp.
Yeah.
So once I had that part in, then the vocal just kind of started speaking to me, because the B part of the vocal, it tells you, it kind of informs you on where it needs to go. Because once you're already in that 16th note syncopated rhythm, then the next part also needs to be, for me, it was telling me it needed to be in that syncopation.
Right.
But it can't be the same 4 chords that were there in the first part.
Okay.
So let's try and mess around with the harmony. So, and it really came out of an exercise that I usually do, when I'm playing guitar. So I'll show you, like, you know. So when I'm like kind of I'll take like one note, and then I'll try and usually find different chords
with that one note. Yeah. Interesting.
So, and I'll keep doing this till I find, interesting, and then you'll kind of voice lead it.
Yeah.
So if the melody is going up, then I will kind of start building a voice leading kind of progression.
Interesting.
But when you kind of do that, it opens up the entire palette. So you're not in a diatonic framework.
Right.
It's more open, and you have all 12 keys to
100%.
mess around with.
Yeah.
So that was like fun, because it took a while to kind of put that harmony together. And that harmony was not written on the guitar. It was it was kind of I composed it on the keyboard. And once that happened, then the song needed a chorus. And the song was from the Deuri tribe. So so the song is not called Deuri. Actually, the song doesn't have a chorus.
Right.
So the chorus, I put the chorus in. That's my voice, basically.
Oh.
So that was kind of superimposed on the song, and it's a gibberish. It's
so
gibberish.
Cool.
It doesn't mean anything. It just says the word Deuri. That's it.
Oh, right.
And the other words around it don't mean anything, really.
Wow.
So, but it sounds like it's something very important and very exotic, but it's not. So that's it. And then the other parts were. Then Illustrate came on. So Illustrate was touring with me in the last version of Voyage. The first Voyage that we did. And so I got him on board to play with us, and then he came in and did his bit on the song, and then and so on. And so the song kept building, basically.
Right. Yeah, it actually has like a good curve where you kind of have a energy growth that's keeping on growing, and at the end it just like culminates into this.
So the end
super groovy part,
So the end was created for us to play on stage, really.
I can actually picture that. Yeah.
So, like, in fact, all the songs on the album are kind of like sort of beds that I've created to like have fun on stage, because that's one of the learnings that happened when we did the first Voyage, was that there were not enough loose moments in the songs, where you can jam and play, and
right.
And when you're playing festivals, usually people love to groove and they want to basically vibe out, right?
Yeah.
So and unfortunately most of my songs are very dense arrangements.
Right.
So just to give some release in the arrangement, so that you can kind of breathe a little bit before the next song starts.
Right.
So that end is basically a Brazilian influenced percussion jam.
It felt like that as well, because after listening to the song, I also like listened to your guitar solo on it.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I'm so sad that one of the outtakes didn't make it, and you posted on Instagram the outtakes that you had done, and that starting lick was so crazy.
Yeah.
Where you jump on octaves, that was insane.
So, I mean, look, again, the same thing. You want to kind of keep it simple and singable.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I think in that sense it has done the right thing.
I mean, when I'm playing live, I'll usually play a little more out there and more open. But on the record, for me, it always feels like that's the movie. So you want the movie to be like, something which is not. I mean, there are two ways of doing it. You can completely go all up, all balls out and just shred your heck out of it.
Yeah.
Or you kind of present something which is slightly more, not somber, but a little more constructed.
So yeah, maybe it makes sense, because actually, again, this comment is coming from a guitarist, because when a guitarist listens to it,
I agree with you.
Yeah,
100% agree with you.
that jumping and octave jumping kind of lick was so crazy to me. I loved that.
Thank you.
So I actually enjoyed looking at that video. It actually gives us an insight into how you kind of create solos.
Yeah.
Right? You had a couple of outtakes and then you chose one.
So usually, I'll take bits of different solos and I'll put piece it together.
Okay.
I mean, that's kind of how everyone does it. And, I mean, that's how I have been doing it for a long time, and then I heard other guitar players talk about it, and that's how they do it, and so I felt, okay, shit, I'm not the only one.
The only one, yeah.
Because at least for the recording, it's very important to. I mean, that's how I see it. It's
right.
The recording is the movie, and then you play live. That's theater.
Right.
For that, you're allowed to make mistakes, and you can you can be more experimental and more on the edge. because the crowd is more forgiving, when you come
Yeah.
to see. You also want to see something which is slightly more dangerous and more on the edge.
Yeah. Makes sense. Actually now listening to the song and that ending part, talking about that ending part, I just I'm getting this idea and I'm throwing it out there. You're welcome to use it or not. Maybe you can just post like that ending part without anything else, and musicians can jam and come out with their stuff and then post it on
Done.
Instagram.
What you
Because
wanna
that'll
do
be
like
so cool. You
Yeah,
know?
done. Let's do it.
Because I think when you have that, and I think Jacob Collier did this with one of his songs, right?
Okay.
I'm forgetting the name of the song, but he had one of the section of the song that he just opened out to the public, and he just posted that track, and musicians just came up with their own stuff on it. And I think that'll be a very cool idea for
Are
this.
you talking about the end of the song, the drum jam?
Yeah, I think whichever you feel like, is kind of a good place for musicians to kind of experiment.
So I think different musicians will get off on different parts of the song.
Yeah, that's true.
So we can put out the song without the guitar solo and guitar player
Yeah,
solo.
yeah,
Guitar
yeah.
players are. I think somebody did actually. Somebody did, right? Somebody posted a guitar solo.
Oh, okay.
Their
Interesting.
Their own. No, it was a copy of. I don't remember.
Maybe a cover
It
or
was
something.
verbatim.
Cover with a shredded over it.
Yeah.
Oh,
with
okay,
a, yeah,
okay. Yeah,
With
interesting. So I think that actually already answers our question. Like people might be interested in doing this.
Done.
So that's
we'll-
going to be
we'll put
amazing.
that out. You're done.
Yeah. Okay, so that was Deuri, and now actually skipping some songs and going to one of my favorite songs is Charkha. Right? We spoke about that song, and that kind of leads into this last song of the album, which is called Assam, and has an instrumental vibe, right? How did you kind of get into writing that song Assam?
So Assam is obviously, the inspiration is the state of Assam. So, Kalpana and I worked quite a lot together, and really wanted to create something for the Assamese, like like an anthem. So if you remember my last album, it had a song called The Anthem, which was
Anthem,
actually
yeah.
Jana Gana Mana. So it was
Yeah.
my interpretation of that, of the national anthem. So I wanted to kind of leave the audience with a feeling, like a
Makes sense.
warm and fuzzy feeling,
Right,
which
right,
was
right,
sort
right.
of, which was because the whole album is so high energy.
Yeah.
It didn't feel, I didn't feel like it would be right to leave the album with another high energy. It just felt like
Yeah,
it needed something which is more gentle,
Yeah.
with also a little more cinematic, and which kind of puts you in the place where what the title is.
Makes sense.
So the idea really was to create something which would place you in that place in a sense, and then. But I didn't want it to be a completely folk thing, because there's lots of that kind of music that's available and you can listen to that.
Yeah.
And there's millions of pieces. I also wanted to kind of play a little bit and
Right,
have
right,
a more guitar-oriented approach to
Yeah.
the thing. So that's how the guitar solo on that was basically born.
Understood. And just actually why I wanted to come back to Charkha was I wanted to see if you could play the intro to that song.
Happy to
Yeah.
do it. I'll try. I haven't practiced at all since the last gig, but let's see what we can do.
And that intro actually is very interesting because it kind of goes around places, it doesn't stay in one place,
That's it.
Amazing.
It's like a very folky vibe to it. It's got a very folksy sort of vibe to it.
Right, interesting. And actually you've made use of that, all the 6 strings available to you because in the
Yeah.
key of E with the capo.
Yeah,
So,
it's kind of designed to be played with a singer without anything. Also,
right. Of course.
Got that singer-songwriter
Of course.
vibe to it.
Yeah. Sounds so cool.
Thank
so
you.
cool. Amazing. And actually is one of those songs that as soon as you hear the guitar intro and you're like, okay, I want to listen to this.
Yeah.
And amazing song, totally.
Thank you.
And actually coming back to something that you said earlier about the process of writing and the process of composing this album, because you have had this career in ad making, an advertisement, and you've said that, you know, you kind of have some insane deadlines,
Yeah.
you know, and it's kind of like a double-edged sword where you have insane deadlines, and that's why you're able to push stuff out.
Yeah.
And even you put like a certain deadline for this particular album, and that's why you're able to get it out. But at the same time, do you think when you come and think about just the advertisement kind of, you know, the camp, do you think that your creativity kinds of gets killed a little bit because you have some crazy deadlines?
Yes and no. I think the deadline tests you because it kind of tells you that you have to finish something in a particular time.
Right.
As you get better at your craft, because make no mistake, production is craft. Songwriting is an art, I feel,
100%.
but the production part is craft, and craft requires taking decisions. You know, you have to take decisions. How is this working? No, it's not. It's crap. Let's move on. You know, does this snare sound good? No, it's not. Let's move on. Tack. So you have to you continuously take those decisions.
Right.
When you have a lot of luxury of time, you can, especially with the palette that's available today for most, you know, with Splice and all the other stuff that's available, you can just get lost because
100%.
you can never finish a project.
100%.
So I think a deadline is important because it tells you this is the cap. You have to finish it by the end of the day. And you better finish it. Now it's up to you, you know, how you push yourself to do it. Because if you have high standards, irrespective of the deadline, then the deadline is just going to make sure that you live up to those high standards in that much time.
In that much time,
you know? So, and to be fair, if you think about how any art is made, whether it's movies or whether it's any commissioned work, commercial art, let's just say, call it commercial art, everything has a deadline. You know, it has to, because when there is money involved, you know, then there are certain dates that have to be put in place, and you have to kind of work back to a date. So it's only musicians who feel that, you know, oh no, having a deadline is actually bad because it kind of. But that's not true, because, you know, if you go back to any kind of art, even like old pop records and rock records, they all had deadlines. Because the record label told you, we want to release this album by summer because the summer is when the kids are going to go out, they want to hear the songs, you know, whatever. I mean, everything has, and I feel that you have to embrace deadlines. You have to embrace it, and you have to kind of put pencil in a date in the calendar. This is basically what I did. But, you know, I'm saying all this to you right now, like I know what I'm saying, but you think about it, it still took me bloody 9 years to finish the second album. So it doesn't work, you know. It's awful. You have to kind of work really hard to make sure that you adhere to the deadline because, you know, so, but to be fair, I mean, in my case, it's different because I do all this other commercial work. So it usually takes precedence, and you tend to put away what you love.
Right. Okay, so now I'm actually kind of going to ask you questions that I actually wanted to ask you, and I've noted them down.
Okay.
In terms of guitar, right? Is there something that you have been obsessed with? In guitar, something like you've learned something new, or something that you've been keeping, like a bar ye cheez baja rahe ho bar for the past couple of months or whatever.
You mean like a lick or like
anything, like a lick or maybe some new technique that you've discovered on the guitar, or kind of a new genre also?
So I am obsessed right now. I mean, not now, but for a long time, in playing like Hindustani music.
Oh, of course, right.
That is something
amazing.
which I keep wanting to do more of, and that requires a hell of a lot of practice. Because it's not easy, you know. And and the vocabulary for that is not as well defined in the way, you know, like jazz and all those other vocabularies are set in a place. You have musicians who you can listen to and go like, okay, I want to sound like, you know, John McLaughlin or whoever that is. So there are certain benchmarks that are in place. There's a 50-year legacy of that music out. There's transcriptions, there's recordings, there's tutorials, there's all that other stuff. That doesn't exist for Indian classical music and guitar. The only closest person I think comes to that is U. Srinivas, who wrote the book and, you know, on playing mandolin, which is the closest to the guitar. Which to me is like the closest that I like. For me, U. Srinivas is the gold standard for most, you know, stringed instrumentalists.
Right.
Because his knowledge and his feel, especially, I would say, I mean, he was incredibly knowledgeable even at the age of 11. If you've seen his old videos of you, Srinivas, playing, your just jaw falls on the floor looking at this wizard. He was clearly a genius, born into this body, and he was a perfectly formed musician who came into this, physical manifestation.
Amazing.
Because it's not really possible to play like that at that
Right.
young age. So that is what I'm obsessed with, and I find it incredibly challenging to, learn things, and to adapt
But
it.
actually, when I actually now remember that listening to the album, you did have kind of some, adaptations of those Indian classical
So
guitar parts inside the songs.
Yeah, it's permeated. It permeates into my playing. It comes in, and it's there. It's more organic. But to learn entire pieces, it's very difficult, and it takes a lot of time.
And even in some of the outtakes that you had posted on Instagram, they had
Yeah.
like a lot of Indian classical licks, right?
Yeah.
Do you kind of, is it possible for you to explain on how you kind of approach this Indian classical soloing?
So yeah, the way I'll practice usually is I'll kind of I'll set like a pad and I'll set a drone.
Right.
More than like an exercise, which there are plenty of exercise to do, which are like more rudimentary. Like there's. So you do this basically, which is your three octave.
Yeah.
And then you do that in fourths, so you can do.
Interesting.
These are more exercise rudimentary things, which are great for your left hand, right hand technique. What I like doing, what I spend some time doing, is usually just taking like a D open drone like this and just sort of exploring. So it's more an exploration of the entire fretboard, really, which kind of opens up, the thing, and rather than play.
Of course.
Which it's important to do that and spend some time doing that.
Yeah.
But one thing I learned is early is that look at the entire fretboard as one scale. And then your lowest available note and the highest available note is your scale, really. So in this case, if you're playing D, for example.
Right.
So just the color keeps changing, every time you play a different note.
Yeah.
And then what happens is no note is a wrong note.
Of course.
Basically,
So
that's
cool.
You want to get to that place where you can sort of create different colors.
Yeah. And now that's a very cool way for people to look at how you treat a single string as the whole, playing field.
Which is really, it's a study of Hindustani classical music or Carnatic classical music, which is a more raga oriented approach.
Yeah, makes sense.
And you'll take a rag like Yaman, and then basically you'll spend at least a couple of hours just playing Yaman.
Just playing Yaman, yeah.
Don't do anything else. Just explore Yaman. And if you do this every day, your melodic vocabulary will increase 1,000-fold.
100%.
Which is
Makes sense.
more than playing any exercise that you play.
Makes sense. Yeah. We'll pause that now. So cool. Amazing. So, I think, are you also a fan of Prasanna ji?
Yeah, I know him, and
Yeah.
Prasanna he's an incredible guitar player.
Amazing. Like,
Yeah.
you know, one name that, you know, kind of sticks out to me when
Yeah.
you kind of play that is
Yeah.
Prasanna ji, and
Yes.
he's absolutely amazing
Yes,
at
yes.
this kind of playing.
Yeah.
So this is something that I think a lot of viewers can actually go and explore a lot of his works.
Abhay Nayampally as well.
Oh,
you
yes,
know.
yes, yes.
Great young guitar player.
Yeah,
He's
yeah, yeah.
fantastic.
Amazing. Crazy. Okay, so after that, I want to kind of go and ask you a question that I kind of want to get your views on it, which is like, you can teach people how to play chords, you can teach people how to, you know, the objective things, right? And kind of visiting the first earlier thing that we talked about is your instinct, right? Do you think you can teach somebody how to write a melody?
See, writing a melody comes with listening to music. That's the first step, really.
First step, yeah.
You know? And you know, I have a saying, which is what I tell myself. I tell my kids now, which is that when you decide to become a musician, you should stop being a tourist and live and become a local.
Right,
And
right.
which means that you stop listening to music the same way a
Anybody
normal
else
person
would. Yeah,
listen
yeah,
to,
yeah.
and
Makes
you have to
sense.
listen to music more intently, and you have to lean into what is the workings of the intervals in a melody. Why do certain melodies sound nice? You know, what is the relationship of the melody against the bass, for example? The most underrated instrument, which nobody seems to ever want to talk about, which is the bass guitar, which is actually, to come back to a question that you asked me earlier,
Yeah.
like what's about my obsession.
Yeah.
I would say more than anything else, my obsession is more with bass than anything else,
Wow.
because that is something that came late to me as a musician, because we are not taught to respect bass players, you know. And bass player, like for me, like a bass player is like a kind of like a mother of the
Yeah.
band, you know.
Yeah.
You know, he or she kind of creates this space, you know, the harmonic space for the song to exist.
Right, right,
And
right.
it basically sets the bandwidth of where the harmony is going to operate from.
Yeah.
And the melody is sort of on top, right?
Yeah. Makes sense.
So, sorry, what was your question again? Your question was about, can you teach somebody how to write melodies?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. As going back to the, like, you know, how people have instincts, and you just get instinct over the period of time.
Yeah, so you have to listen to music. I mean, nobody can teach you how to write a melody. Nobody can teach you how to write a good melody for making it even more, if you have to raise the bar and say that. It's just something that you kind of have to develop from a very
Makes
early stage. You have to consciously kind of be, you know, sing everything that you're trying to do. Whether it's even if it's a harmonic passage, it should have a melodic intent in it. It should not be random.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
So, you know, like for example, in harmony, there is a concept of having you know, chords that move in a particular way, right?
Yeah.
So that itself is basically, it creates a certain, you know, what do you call, it creates a certain sonic, you know, it creates a palette which makes it much more, you know, conducive to listen to.
To listen to,
which
yeah,
makes it
makes sense.
nicer to listen to. You
Makes
know?
sense. Makes sense.
So I think all those things are important, but I think writing melodies is an art, and it's very difficult. And you can say something controversial like either you have it or you don't. But I believe that you can learn it. You know, you can develop. It needs to be developed. It can't be taught. It's a very personal thing. You know, like you know, like Indian, like for example, we come from Indian culture, and there are certain like cultural things which are prevalent only in India. They're not prevalent in Philippines or in Japan or in the US. You know, which are purely, like, they're really easily Indian. You know, lean into that. Like I would tell all the musicians, like, don't study Hindustani music. If you study Indian music, it will dramatically increase. It will improve your whatever music you're doing. I don't care if you're doing rock, metal, whatever.
Yeah.
If you study Indian music, it's going to change your life and it's going to improve your music.
100%. Yeah. So now, actually, kind of riffing off this kind of question, where I asked you about if you think that melody writing can be taught, right? So one of the other questions that come from...
I didn't say it can be taught.
Yeah. So like that was the question that I was asking,
Yeah.
right? So basically another question that stems out from this is that we have all heard a version of people saying कि टूटे हुए दिल से ही music निकलता है, right? So basically that says in some way that if you're not in a bad place, or not, I don't know if for the lack of a better word, I'm just calling it bad.
Yeah.
But if you're not in a dark place or something that's, nagging at you constantly,
Yeah.
you will not be able to come out of that and make some beautiful art out of that. Do you completely believe in that ideology?
Partially. I
Okay.
think the word that you're looking for is hungry. You have to be hungry. And you have to be dissatisfied, and you have to be insecure,
Right.
and you have to be all those things.
Right.
Because I think if you think about why we do music or why we create art, it is to kind of fill this void within us, which is empty.
Empty, yeah.
Otherwise there is no, if you're full,
Yeah.
then you wouldn't need to. And there are days when you come into the studio, or you come in and you feel like, I'm not really feeling like it.
Right.
Because you're full.
Yeah.
You're emotionally full.
Yeah.
And you have nothing to say.
Yeah.
Not because you don't have the knowledge or because you don't have the vocabulary, but it's just at that moment in time you're emotionally, maxed out.
You're
right?
maxed out, yeah.
I feel that great music and comes from hunger, and that hunger you have to eat less.
Right,
In the sense that you have to kind of you have to set milestones for yourself, and nobody else can set it for you.
100%.
So you should want to do something. You should desire, I would say, to want to create something.
Yeah.
And that comes with also being humble
Yeah.
inside.
Right.
Have humility. You can be a giant mega pop star, but you can stay still within yourself. You should feel like I have not done enough.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to look at it, because I was seeing Javed Akhtar साहब से एक interview देख रहा था उनका, and he was saying कि if you're an artist that by default means that you are empty inside, and you kind of are looking to fill that void by creating art.
Yeah, that's
And actually something that's connected to this question is, I was going to ask you that, did you have days where you came in for working on the album and you were like, bhai aaj kuch samajh nahi aa raha
of course. Yeah,
Right?
you have it.
And I think this is one of the most unique answers I've gotten.
Yeah.
That if you're feeling that way, that you don't have any ideas, it's because you're emotionally full. That makes so much sense.
Yeah, or I went through an entire, many months, a few years ago actually, where I was not feeling inspired to do anything.
Right.
It was just after COVID actually. I think a lot of people I know around the planet had this sort of existential crisis during
Right,
COVID,
right,
right?
of course,
Because we
of
were
course.
at home alone with our own thoughts.
Of course. Yeah.
And we were like, shit, what is the meaning of life? Why are we doing this 9 to 5, or why are we doing what we're doing? And
100%.
and it was a catalyst for a change in a lot of people. People
Yeah.
moved countries, people moved houses, they changed their lives.
Yeah.
People didn't go back to work.
100%.
So many people changed a lot of things. I think it was an incredible catalyst, and for me, it did the opposite actually, because I came out of that and I just got completely I was broken for a while. I was like shit, and it took me a while to get back on the saddle actually.
Makes
I
sense.
hadn't played. I also went through a very bad accident actually, where I broke my hand,
Oh.
and I couldn't play for a few years. 2 whole years I didn't play guitar. So
Wow.
this is 2019, 18, 19 and 20. I started playing only in 20 again, and it took me a while to get my chops
Get
up.
back, yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, sometimes these things take time to to fix. Inspiration is a hard thing to talk about actually.
Yeah.
Because especially in music, because there's so much of it depends on that one spark.
Yeah. So much, yeah.
Especially with bands. I mean, think about it. I've been in a band, so I know.
Yeah. And there, of course, you have, that spark has to create, has to have spark in all of the band members.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
It's so dependent on that spark.
Everybody has to feel the same thing at the same
exactly,
time.
exactly.
My gosh, it's bad enough that one person has to feel it, and then you're asking that for 5 people. Good luck
Okay.
with that.
Yeah. Well, I think on a closing note, I can say that I have had an amazing time talking to you.
Likewise, man.
And
It's been fun.
it's been so much, because as an artist, you always yearn to kind of go into another artist's brain and kind of see how you make art,
Yeah.
That gives you a lot of answers on how I can do this,
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to end it with 3 quick questions that I have for you.
Fire away.
One is, what was the hardest song in this album to record? And then actually maybe you can even give us the opposite, which was the easiest.
I'll tell you which is the hardest song. They all were challenging in different ways, but they were also fun. But I think the hardest song to work out from the album was Suprabhatam for me. Because not only is that solo a pain in the, gosh, it's a difficult solo, and I have to thank and curse Abhay for that. I had to learn that solo, and it took me a while to do it. And then on top of that, there's a hell of a lot of harmony in that song. There's a lot of chords which I imposed upon myself. I don't know why. I'm a sucker for punishment. So it took me a while to actually learn Suprabhatam. That's a tough song to play. I mean, that's the song usually we'll end up playing at the opening of the set.
Of course. So, and your opening is on such a high pressure note that you have to like nail it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and if you kind of talk about the opposite, the easiest one, and which felt like a breeze,
I think, I would think Assam was relatively, easy, because I had a clear concept for what I wanted to do for the song.
Makes sense.
I think a lot of times when you're clear in your thoughts on what you want the song to sound like, and that does happen sometimes also.
Okay.
Where you will get a very clear vision of what the song is supposed to sound like.
Interesting.
And when you get those kind of visions, then it's just a question of execution,
Makes sense.
So then you have to be in the perfect physical space. Your chops have to be good. You have to come prepared, and you come and then you'll finish everything in one shot usually.
Yeah, of course.
Happens, and it happens for me even for when I'm doing a film, for example. I'll come in and I'll come in with the entire music like ready in my head. And then it's just question of. So I would say Assam would be, but come back to the hardest one. I'm thinking again. Deuri was a challenge to produce, because it was a very delicate mix. I remember Deuri is not an easy mix, and I was also very reticent to finish that song because you don't want the song to sound bad.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course.
Like, I think one of the insecurities like I have as a composer, producer is that you don't want to finish a song because you don't want it to sound awful when it goes out.
Right.
And maybe you feel like it sounds best in its unfinished self.
Right.
Sounds weird.
Yeah.
But, it's kind of this weird insecurity which you have. So, Deuri took a while to arrive at, in its... Because there are a lot of moving parts in the song.
Yeah, and I think you also said that you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you came up with the rock version first.
Yeah.
And then you didn't click on it, and then you made the second one.
Yes. That actually. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so now the second question that I have for you is, who are some music artists or some songs that you're listening to right now?
If you look at what I might tell you is very different from the way my playlist looks, by the way. Which is thanks to my kids who make me listen to the most intense and horrific music on the planet. So I can listen to anything from Taylor Swift to some goth music, which my older one listens to, and so it's really a mixed bag for me at the moment. I listen to a lot of pop music, of course, but from all over the world, and then I'll listen to some folk music from Africa sometimes. So it's really a mix. It's not like I don't have a particular like artist that I'm listening to right now. It's usually I'll find songs and then that song will take me into. I'll just deep dive into that artist and I'll go deep into it.
Makes sense.
So it's usually a mishmash of stuff.
Got it. So the third and the last question that I want to finish it with is, because we are guitarists and we are at a guitar channel, do you have a favorite guitar chord?
Ooh. I like how ninth chord sounds. Usually, ninths are the favorites for most guitar players, right? These.
Oh yeah.
These.
Oh right.
These chords.
Oh yeah. Yes.
This is also nice. The 6/9 chord I love. So I mean, for a lack of
I think that's perfect, because that's the same chord that I am keeping on playing for the past few weeks.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know what to do with it. I just keep playing it.
I mean, even the open chords sound beautiful, right?
Oh yeah, the add 9. Yeah. Amazing. Well, this was so much fun, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man.
This.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Loved it.
Thank you.